For Reaper Metal Productions, I am Adam of Unbaptized Records, making a brand new video for you today. And today I'm going to go over what, in my opinion, are the closest bands to having a basically flawless discography. So, how I define that. So, basically, meaning as close to a flawless discography as you're going to get. So, what does that mean to me? It means every album is one I own, every album is one I listen to regularly, I enjoy, and there's really no skips. So if I'm going to line up the discography from oldest to newest, probably including EPs and stuff, but not necessarily because, of course, there are certain bands that have a ton of EPs and splits. None of them really fall into this category for me, but really any band where I can at least say that every single full album is one I enjoy, I give it at least a 5 out of 10. I listen to it on a regular enough basis. So it's a little bit more of a loose term. I can't say every album's a 10 out of 10 because I can't imagine there's any band out there where every single album's a 10 out of 10 unless it's like Repulsion Horrified because they have one album, obviously. So, and the other qualification is the band has to have at least 5 albums because it's also easy to pick a band that has, again, 2 or 3 albums and they can all be 10 out of 10s, which is not super common either. But, and then these are all going to be pretty obvious if you know me, anything about my favorite bands, because these mostly all fall within my favorites list anyways, but that's kind of how they got there. And some of them have been there for 20 years. So, say all of them except for 2 have pretty much been in my top 10 for the last 20 years. So, it's not really going to be a super big surprise, but I still kind of wanted to go through it anyways. And I tried to pick their earliest albums or releases for each one. And the first is definitely going to be the most obvious. And this is the band Cattle Decapitation. So there's not a single release by them I do not like. I would say my least favorite by far is Karma Bloody Karma. That's their 5th release technically because Human Jerky and Homivore, some people consider them EPs, but because of the length, I mean, this has 18 songs, but it's like 18 minutes. Well, that's also because when they first started out, the band wanted to be essentially sort of like not quite a Carcass clone, but heavily Carcass influenced. So that's why they did sort of like a Death Grind album, their first 2 releases. So technically they're EP lengths, but they're considered full length. So I would say out of everything they've done so far, and they're on 10 albums, again, if you consider the first 2 releases full lengths, which I know the band does because I've straight up asked Travis Ryan and he says he does. So there's really only one album I don't care for that much, and I still enjoy it. I still own the LP, the CD, the picture disc. It's just one has to be first, one has to be last, and I just didn't like the direction. It was the last album with Billy Anderson as a producer. And right after that, they started using Dave Otero as their producer, and then that's when Harvest Floor. Actually, I think the Harvest Floor was also Billy, but that's sort of when the transition of the band kind of happened. And I feel like they became just better overall musicians. They did kind of lose the Death Grind edge to them, which is unfortunate because, I mean, honestly, they really kind of did after their second album. But I think even Human Manure is a great album, and Harvest Floor was still really good, but it still had a bit of that sort of chaotic vibe to it. But I do enjoy every release by them. I've listened to them all very regularly. They're my favorite band, so it kind of makes sense. So, again, something's got to be first, something's got to be last. And they didn't do a lot of splits or 7 inches or EPs or anything. They're pretty much a straight discography of full length, so kind of easy to put them in this category as well because there aren't too many releases that stray from the normal pattern of releasing a full length album, touring, and then 2-3 years later coming up with another album, putting it out maybe the 4th year. So pretty consistent with that. And with no surprise here, next is my second favorite band of all time. So again, this kind of makes sense. It's a who's who of what bands I like. But there's a reason for it because I do think that their discography is essentially as close to flawless as possible, and that is Exhumed. So, of course, we have the Gore Metal CD. I just remember between the first 4 Cattle Decapitations and the first 3 Exhumed records, that was like the majority of my favorite listening stuff in high school. When I first got into metal music around 04, 05, so again, we're hitting about 20 years now, I listened to those first few albums by each band on repeat. So much so that it's just drilled into my memory, and some of my favorite songs come off the first few releases. Even though I do love some of the later stuff as well, I think each album has its merit. There's really nothing by these bands I don't like. It's always going to make me want to go back to the originals. So with Exhumed, it's the same thing. I mean, some of the best stuff was written within the first 3 records, and They kind of broke up after that, came back with All Guts No Glory, had much different sound, at least on Necrocracy. Didn't have the Mike Beams or Ross Sewage lows, and luckily Ross has been back with the band, but really made a difference back with Ross and Mike doing the lows on these first three albums. So definitely my favorites, but I do enjoy everything by them. And then again, no surprise here, because this band is now my fourth favorite band of all time, and that's Dying Fetus. Again, one of those bands that I heard back in around 04, 05. It just stuck with me. And even though I had a tendency to listen to some of these bands' later albums, I was lucky enough to get into the early stuff. And I just remember, like, first song here, Blunt Force Trauma, when that came on, and you have like that weird sort of overlapped, like screaming, yelling, or whatever it is. It's like kind of guttural noises coming out for vocals in the beginning. I just thought that was so cool. And some of the intros and everything, it just really grabbed me. And I love that brutal death metal vibe and how kind of raw it was and how they progressed as musicians, but still not as raw and brutal later on, but it's still really good musicianship and really heavy, great music no matter what. So I really enjoy all of Dying Fetus's work, and I love how they progressed as musicians. It kind of takes away a little bit from the brutality, but they did become a bit more technical as time went on. So it does still have its merit there. And that's why they're one of my favorites. And I consider all their albums to be good. So good to great to amazing, but nothing under good. Next two are very obvious early second generation death metal bands. There's really going to be no surprises on this list. And this one is Cannibal Corpse. To me, there is also no truly bad Cannibal Corpse album, although I will say that my least favorite is ironically the first one I ever picked up. And I still have the copy. It was the censored cover, the double disc version of the album. I almost forgot what it was. That's how much I love it. The Wretched Spawn. Yeah, I couldn't even remember what it was because I didn't like it that much. So kind of fun fact, I went to a store and I picked up Morbid Angel Domination. I picked up Wretched Spawn, and I picked up, I think it's the third 6 Feet Under Warpath, I think. And all three of those I did not like. So just imagine being kind of young and dumb and not knowing the music scene that well. And I wasn't that young, but young enough. And picking up something like Domination and thinking, why are people so obsessed with this album? And then you listen to the other ones, they're like, oh, that's why people love Morbid Angels, because everything before that's awesome, and especially Altars and Abomination, Desolation. So that's why, obviously, I don't think anyone would have that band being flawless discography. I mean, I guess there could be that one person out there, that one weirdo, but it's not going to be me. But I think Cannibal Corpse is pretty straightforward. I like everything they put out. I own it all. Again, there's going to be a worst, there's going to be a best, but even on their, what I would consider their worst album or my least liked album, I can still find things I like about it. It's just not going to be something I'm spinning regularly. That's going to be the first 4, 5 albums, and then kind of random Barnes albums. Like I like Vile, I like Gallery of Suicide, I like Bloodthirst. That's a great one. And there's just sort of, really, it's only the Wretched Spawn. I do like Kill. Yeah, I pretty much like everything. So yeah, there's really not a bad album. I mean, the last two I kind of didn't care for too much, but still really good. So, and then similarly, classic second generation death metal. Again, a very obvious one is Deicide. Very similarly, there's no really bad Deicide album. I know people didn't like. I mean, beating a dead horse here, but the albums that they were doing to try to get off Roadrunner, and then the album that came out when Glenn was going through his divorce and just wasn't as good, but there's still some solid songwriting. When the brothers left, there were still good albums afterwards. I think they kind of faltered the first album they weren't on. Stench of Redemption to me has like 1 or 2 good songs. I really like Homage for Satan. That's about it. And I'm sure there's a few other good ones. I just haven't listened to in a while. But then they really pick up the style after that. So last few albums were great. Really have nothing bad to say about it, but there's really nothing much to say because they're just obvious picks. And I can't help it. I mean, there's only so many bands out there that have larger discographies that I've listened to all the music for, had years and years to digest them. So this is sort of like a no-duh video, but I mean, what am I going to do? I can't lie. Just make up some band and go, oh, this one has a flawless discography. It's like, well, I don't know that band. These are the only ones I know. So the last two, again, kind of obvious for me if you know anything about me. And this one is my favorite band to see live, and that is Municipal Waste. So I have their '03 debut, Waste 'Em All, here. And they also recently released one of their like early EPs or 7 inches, I think, and include a few bonus songs. It's called Tango and Thrash, which is got Kurt Russell on the front. So obviously his character from the movie. I think it's a good release. It kind of has this vibe to it. The first album is much more like a crossover punk, and then after that, with Hazardous Mutation, it kind of goes more into their thrash vibe and party thrash, ooh, whatever, pizza thrash, high school thrash. I don't care. Call it what you want. They're one of my favorite bands. So if you don't like it, again, I really don't care. You listen to your tough guy black metal or whatever else you listen to. I'll listen to some of that too, but I'll listen to my Municipal Waste. And if you don't like it, then more for me. I really don't care. And next and last, as far as I could really think off the top of my head, for flawless discographies, bands with every CD is one that I really enjoy. This is Toxic Holocaust. So Evil Never Dies, also an '03 debut. One of the bands I will never understand the hate for. I don't understand the vibe that they supposedly suck after they went to Relapse, or, Joel sold out after the first album. I mean, whatever. You think whatever you want. You could be wrong. I don't really care. They're an awesome band, and his side projects are great too. So, like, I have 2 War Ripper LPs, 7 inches, one of which is up on my wall over there, signed. The other one's put away, but also signed. The Yellow Goat stuff I like. I haven't listened to his like synth side project stuff. I probably won't like it, or maybe I will. I don't know, but it's not metal. But either way, it's still maybe it's okay. But any metal related stuff that he's done is also great. So those are my flawless discography bands. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what your choices are. I'm sure there's some kind of obvious ones I missed, or ones like, let's say, Vader. They're probably as close to a flawless discography with this credentials that these credentials I gave. The thing is, I'll just be honest, I don't own all their albums. I haven't listened to them. I'm sure if I had, which I really kind of wish I had, but someday I'll eventually have them. I just collecting things slowly but surely, they would probably be on this list too. So kind of an honorable mention, but since I haven't officially listened to all their albums, I can't say for sure. It's just a really strong guess because I've listened to most of them. I can't imagine there's going to be a crappy one in between. So again, let me know what your choices are in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.